Hey friends, Shen here. Kevin! Oh God. So a lot of you have been asking me which camera I use and whether or not I'd recommend it. I shoot on the Canon 1DX Mark II, the one that's filming right now. I really like this camera, but there are a couple things that I've learned throughout my time using it about this camera and Canon cameras in general that if I was buying a camera again today, I would definitely take these into serious consideration. So I wanted to share that with you today, and I hope it benefits you if you're searching for a camera or just something to keep in mind as you're trying to figure out in the future which camera you might want to get. Here are my favorite and least favorite parts of having this camera, especially in the context that this camera is already 3 years old and camera technology has progressed a lot since it was first released. So is this camera still worth buying today? Let's find out. Oh yeah. All right, so excited. I got something I want to share with you all, but more on that. All right. Also, I've never let my facial hair grow out this far before. Now I'm really curious to see what it looks like grown out. So that means you guys get to stare at this half-grown caterpillar face. You're welcome. Anyways, so the topic at hand, the Canon 1DX Mark II, the one we're filming on right now, is it still worth buying? Starting off with what I love about this camera. So I've had this camera for almost a year now, and it is an absolute beast of a camera. Like, you could honestly carry this camera as a self-defense weapon and knock anybody out with it. It's that sturdy, and it seriously produces some amazing footage. So I get to pretend like I'm talented and know what I'm doing. Listen, kid, money solves all your problems. This is by far Canon's best DSLR camera, and in my limited experience, having not played with every single Canon camera, I still think this is the best camera. It's the most powerful one they have in their entire DSLR lineup, and it's the only one, at least to my knowledge so far, that allows you to shoot in 120 frames per second while you're recording HD video. That's pretty freaking awesome. And because it's Canon, because it's not just Canon, it's the best Canon DSLR, it makes the most of Canon's colors. Canon, compared to all the other camera brands, has by far, I think, the best color science, and it's well known for that across the board. There's something about Canon colors that make it look like you're just looking through a piece of glass and that's exactly what you see, versus other camera brands tend to make it look like you're looking with an Instagram filter. Like, they'll be sort of like tinted in a certain way and they just don't look as real. You often have to spend a lot of time fixing those colors and adjusting those colors in the editing process, and that can take a lot of time. Versus the Canon, you can take footage from this 1DX and just shove it straight into YouTube or wherever, and it'll look pretty good already without you having to work on it very much. Then there's the autofocus. If you're shooting video, most likely you're gonna have to use autofocus unless you're shooting with some nice, super nice cinema lens on a cinema camera and have a whole team helping you, someone pulling the focus. But if you're a one-person team shooting for something like YouTube or any sort of online video content, autofocus is so important because if it's not in focus, what's the point of having that 1080 resolution or 4K resolution if you're not even able to see what you need to see in focus? So autofocus is a big win for this camera in my book. Then in terms of photography, if you do both videography and photography, this is a really, really good photo camera. It's one of the best. Like, if you're looking at a bunch of professional photographers shooting some sort of event or like sporting event or something, most of them are actually gonna have this camera. So this is top of the line professional. But for me, I actually don't do that much photography. I mostly shoot video, so it's not that useful for me. But when I do shoot photography, I notice that I have so much wiggle room, so much stuff that I can play with in the data when I port those photos over to Lightroom to start editing. If I was more into photography, these would be massive big points in my consideration. And then just thinking about lenses, I have a ton of Canon lenses, and so that's why this is a huge plus for me. I would lose a lot of money if I were to sell all my Canon lenses and then try to buy back, say, another brand lenses. And so for me, it's kind of a sunk cost mentality, but I really like being able to use all of the lenses that I've already collected and use the glass that I'm familiar with. Now, of course, I can get an adapter for whatever lenses I have, but the thing is that sacrifices a little bit in terms of the autofocus. They tend to be a little bit slower and I think a little bit less reliable. So that's what I love, but on the other hand, there's a lot of things that I also don't really like and really make me hesitant to recommend this camera, especially right now. So first off, there's the crop factor when you try to shoot 4K on this camera. When you try to shoot 4K, the sensor is not completely used. There's like a I think it's 1.4 crop factor. So if you're shooting 1080, you get the full sensor, but when you're shooting in 4K, for some reason it crops in and you're not able to get as wide of a shot on the lens that you're using. It feels like you're actually using a crop sensor. Now this didn't used to bother me that much because my thought process was 1080 looks good enough, and the fact is more people are using their mobile phones to watch YouTube and go on social media. Those video screens tend to be smaller and it's harder for you to even tell if you're shooting in 1080 or 4K. But as I started to shoot and watch more, I started to kind of change that opinion. When I watch videos on my MacBook, for instance, I actually start to notice that my 1080 videos don't actually look as good as 4K videos. So I'm actually gonna start trying to shoot more in 4K. So because there's that crop factor when you shoot in 4K on this camera, your lenses end up looking way more zoomed in than they actually are. This isn't much of an issue when you're shooting outside and you have that flexibility to move back and forth to change and readjust your framing. But if you're shooting in a studio like me, that actually makes things a little bit tougher. I had to switch out to a super wide lens. Hold on. Because this lens, this is the lens that I was shooting on. This is the Canon 24 to 70 millimeter L lens, and it just wasn't wide enough for me to get the shot that I wanted. So I threw on the 20 millimeter, and that's what we're looking through right now. So that's just something to pay attention to. And because of the difference in that framing of 4K versus 1080, that means you're gonna actually have to have an even wider range of lenses at your disposal, meaning that it might cost you a little bit more money if you wanna shoot in both 1080 to get the 124 frames per second, and if you also wanna shoot in 4K. Also, by the way, if you're curious how I set up the studio and what everything looks like here around me right now, how I set it up, why I set it up the way I did, check out another video that I made. It's a 2-part series on how to set up a YouTube studio and how to set up professional lighting for these kinds of videos. Anyways, back on topic, the next thing that I wanted to mention, this camera is freaking heavy. It is a monster. I looked this up, it is almost 3 pounds in weight, just the camera body itself. Now throw on another lens like this. This is I think a pound, or it feels like 1.5 pounds. This plus that is gonna be some serious weight that you're gonna have to lug around all day. And the thing about shooting video is it's not like shooting photo where you can just take a shot handheld all the time. Usually when you're shooting video, you're gonna have something else attached, right? So I shoot with the Ronin S. All right. So this is the gimbal that I have attached to the camera, and the camera attached to this lens. So in total, that's a huge amount of weight that I'm carrying. I actually hurt both of my shoulders when I was carrying this for a couple hours just because of how heavy everything was. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Know what sort of filmmaking you're gonna be doing. Are you gonna be in a studio all day, or are you gonna be running, gunning, trying to shoot a bunch of action sports or whatever? And if you're gonna be carrying a lot of this equipment, that's gonna actually be a huge strain on your shoulders. So, yeah. So then finally there's the price tag. This camera cost almost $6,000 when I first bought it. Now I think it's a little bit cheaper by a couple $100, but it's still a pretty hefty sum. But compared to the price of other pretty decent cameras on the market, like Sony's A7 III, for example, the A7 III goes for about, I think, $2,000 body only. That's $4,000 difference. You could buy 3 of those cameras for the price of 1 of these cameras. So depending on your financial situation, spending that extra $4,000 on a camera might not actually be that beneficial for you and not bring you as much return on investment compared to spending it on maybe lenses or other sort of camera equipment like gimbals and other things, or maybe even spending that on getting you to places where you can take better footage, like going to Iceland, because everyone's going to Iceland, or like maybe if you're trying to do this full time to make a business out of it like me, buying more of that startup runway, that savings in the bank that you get to burn through so you have more time to be able to hit that sustainability with your business. So really take into account, like, is this camera worth that extra $4,000 to you? I would say right off the bat though, if you are not serious about creating content and do not know your way around cameras, this would definitely not be the best entry-level camera. And if you don't really need good cinematics, this might also not be the best for you. I would go with something probably in Sony's lineup, like their A7 III or A7S III by the time that comes out. Really, really hard to justify that $4,000 extra price tag. However, I would say if you are anybody who makes money either directly or indirectly through the videos you make, I would recommend this camera probably about half the time. Because if you're someone who's an influencer on social media, or even if your company makes videos and you want to represent your company in a positive light, that $4,000 does not matter as much because you're using it as an investment to generate more income. So with that all in mind, am I getting rid of this camera? The answer is no. With the colors that are coming out of this camera and the fact that I'm doing a lot more studio shooting now, makes this actually the perfect studio camera for me for these specific purposes. The only other one I'd probably consider if I were to do this all over again is to get a really dedicated studio camera, which is the C200. Other YouTubers like Armando Ferreira, go check him out, he's amazing. Matt Diavella, they all shoot on the Canon C200, which is a dedicated cinema camera. But since I am now shooting a lot more stuff here at my desk, I do have a need for a second camera mounted overhead so that I can film both my face and you guys can see what's happening on my desk at the same time. So today I was super happy that I got to go to Sammy's Camera. Not sponsored, I just really love the people there and the work that they're doing. They've been so helpful to me. I went and I picked up a new camera. What camera is it, you ask? It is the oh man, I wanted to cut it there so bad. The camera that I got is the Canon A7 III. It's been out for a little bit. The A7S III might be coming out soon, but for now we don't know when that is happening. And this has a lot of the features that I would actually recommend to anybody starting YouTube and really wants the best quality camera they can get without breaking the bank. I would say, aside from the camera I'm shooting right now, this is the best camera to get if you want to shoot anything related to slow motion specifically. This is the only Canon camera that shoots the 120 frames per second, at least to my knowledge. Sony cameras, a lot more of them can do that 120 frames per second. It's not as great, but it's, for the price, Sony cameras, they seem to be amazing. So I got this camera and it's gonna be my second camera, probably gonna be the camera that I start taking outside with me more, because having this big of a camera just made it so much of a hassle to the point where I just never wanted to go outside and shoot video. So I'm gonna check this one out and let you guys know what I think. I've got a good feeling about this one. So I'll cover more in depth on this camera in the next video. You can click on that at the end of this video. I'll throw it on the end card there. But yeah, I'm excited to dig into this because I think this is, I'm like 99% sure that this is the camera I would recommend to almost everybody who asks me what camera they should get to make YouTube videos or even like ads for your company or whatever, social media content. This, if you've got the budget for it, $2,000 I think is probably the way to go. So anyways, I'm curious, let me know in the comments, would you recommend this camera? And would you recommend this camera? And most importantly, would you recommend this? What do you think? Should I keep it or should I shave it? Let me know in the comments. Oh, and if it's your first time here, thanks so much for checking out this channel. I hope you found the information useful. On this channel, I'm trying to figure out how we can use video to make the world a more loving place together. Like trying to make meaning and make people feel stuff and connect on a human level through the videos and images that we create. Please consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification icon. It would be an honor to have you with us as we try to figure this thing out together. So anyways, till next time, much love, my friends. Peace. Cool beans.